Awesome. So we are recording. Let's do it. So Lyle, I'm just trying to remember how we initially met. I think Ryan reached out to you initially, right? On via DMs or something along those lines. And I guess the first time we met was through a sales conversation, but it's been really good to getting to know you over the past year, meeting up in person and just like working with you broadly. But wanted to bring you on to the pod just because I think you think about outbound in the right ways. And I say this as a person who works across lots like over I personally help like over 100 companies, and I work a lot with the heads of BD, and very, very, very few of them are thinking about outbound the right way or thinking about it from a customer centric perspective. So I'm really glad to have you on the pod and share some of the stuff you're doing with the world.
Yeah, awesome. Happy to be here.
Let's I don't know, let's talk a little bit about you. Like tell me a little bit more about your story. I know you were previously at Shopify. Tell me your story about like getting into sales and pre-Rocket Reach.
Yeah, I mean, I was a psych major in university, so I've always had a passion for like problem solving. I wanted to do it in a more competitive environment. So I think that's what led me into sales. I've spent my career post university kind of building and scaling sales orgs in tech. At Angie, I started in sales. I went on to lead a 15-person sales team there. At Shopify, I was one of the first sales leadership hires. We built the team from 0 to 43 reps in under 2 years, like minimal burn, really quick payback on the programs that we were running. And at Rocket Reach, I run our inside sales and business development. So inbound, outbound, and conversion. We rebuilt outbound. Sorry, we rebuilt inbound, launched outbound from scratch, layered in lots of cool like AI tools and and motion so that new reps perform more like seasoned execs. And we've kept our CAC pretty low and built some really scalable engines on the outbound side of the house. So it's been fun, exciting.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things you mentioned twice right now actually is about efficiency and CAC, which I feel like is something that a lot of people don't think about. I feel like there's a lot of growth at all costs type of mentality, and people's number one response to, hey, I need more pipeline is I'm just going to hire more people, throw bodies at the problem, increase activity, and purely that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like it sounds like you're thinking a lot about efficiency. Let's say you had to cut, you didn't have a lot of SDRs. Let's say like people like
Yeah.
someone's listening to this and they don't have a big team and they're under pressure to be performing like they're a bigger team. What would you say, like going back to basics, what do you feel like people should be thinking about? And why do you think like smaller teams can actually perform like a larger team, especially today with all the tooling and automation we have?
That was a big initiative that we had at Rockridge. I'm a big fan of scaling through tooling and not throwing bodies at the problem. You can go down a rabbit hole with tooling, especially like every other day there's a new company that goes out and that comes out that solves for X problem. So like you don't want to go off the deep end, but I am a believer in scaling through tooling versus headcount. The first thing I do is I stop using parallel dialers for outbound. I think parallel dialers were, created to offset declining connect rates. But in today's kind of market, there are a lot of tools that actually help you identify contacts with a verified mobile phone, right? So I would train my reps, right? Instead of making 500 dials in an hour using a parallel dialer, they'll make 40 dials in an hour, but they're all calling into direct mobile phones, and they're using Rocket Reach and other tools to do so. And I train my reps on running highly effective cold calls to obviously thread to a demo and other next steps. Um, I'd also pull reps out of like one-to-one cold email. Cold email is like ineffective at the rep level. I'd push leaders to make email more centralized and automated, and just do it at scale. Like not 50 to 100, but like 8 to 10,000 emails a day. Like that, those are the levels that you need to to be operating at for you to see kind of the fruits of cold email. It's like the least effective channel, lowest converting. So you need to do it at scale. What I would do instead is I would double down on the phones and selling on LinkedIn. So I'd use Rocket Reach for mobile phones. I'd use Letter Drop to spark like relevant threads and spend time on like, meaningful posts and engaging with people that are actually in market, not just like inbox busy work and, sending hyper personalized emails. So
In terms of people actually trying to implement these programs, what do you see when somebody's been doing this for 10 years and their default motivation, the default way they've been solving this problem is I need more headcount or we're going to increase volume activity. We talked about how you want to be efficient. What and their argument is like, hey, this worked for me for the past 5 years. Like, why change? What would you say to them in terms of like, why should I do it your way as opposed to the way I've been doing it forever?
I mean, the question is like, is it working? Right? Are you solving the problem? Are you tackling your TAM in an efficient way? I think that less is more, and you lean on tooling, to help you scale. I would say I take 5 reps with, you know, operating with a really strong tech stack over 50, just kind of spraying and praying, right? Because when shit doesn't work, you're stuck having to, you have to lay people off and have really tough conversations versus just doubling down and investing in the folks that you have and getting them productive and building up their skills. It's like a lot of, like craft is a huge issue as well. Like most reps that are doing business development is like aren't getting the coaching and training that they need to even do the job effectively. So, the question, like most teams resort to just adding more people instead of just investing in the people that you have and getting them, to operate at higher efficacy. I think that will pay off more than just adding more headcount. I would say like, spend more time with fewer, versus the inverse.
It feels like automation or building the right stack to enable your reps is increasingly getting complicated. It wasn't this complicated like 5 to 10 years ago. And now it feels like you almost need like fairly high like RevOps chops to make things happen. I imagine a lot of people are actually not doing the things you mentioned just because they're scared or they feel like they don't understand this stuff, or they haven't really thought about the math behind it. It's way easier for them to do things that they're familiar with, which is think about comp plans and training, which are all important, don't get me wrong, than to reevaluate the fundamentals. And so I don't know if you have friends who've been in that boat or if you've ever been in that boat previously before you got really savvy about this stuff. But I'm curious how you like, what would you say to somebody like that? How would you like help them think about how to get out of that zone of fear effectively?
So that's a great question. I've been in that position before, stuck between, trying to be a proper steward of company funds, but also executing on what the business asks of us and make sure that we have the right tools to do so. So, what I would recommend is you kind of look across the board and, ask yourself, like, what are the blockers? Like, what are we running up against? What are the headwinds that we're experiencing? And is there, a tool or two that can help solve? And that, and for us, that was, we're a phone heavy org. How do we get more efficient with the numbers that we're calling into so we can have more conversations over an extended period of time? We went and got tools like Tight Next. So we're calling into verified mobile phones, right? And we're doing that all day, every day. And that's yielding, there's a lot of learnings, there's a lot of positive conversations, and there's conversations that also convert to demos and subsequent calls, right? The other piece was we know that cold email is dead and it only works at scale. So we found some outbound partners, right, to help us run cold email at scale. And then the last piece of it was, we want to do more social selling. We want to engage like in this age where, there's so much noise and there's a lot of AI and there's like a lack of human interaction. Like we need to, engage with people on channels where, you can still have that human interaction. And we use Letterdrop to do that. We're engaging with relevant posts, people that are in market or thinking about or posting about problems similar to what we solve, and we're able to engage with them in an actionable way. And those were the 3 areas that I was passionate about solving, and those are the tools and how we got there. So I would just kind of pick it apart and look at the things that are most important and say, like, is there a tool that solves for this, right? And how does it speak with our other systems? And if all systems are, if all systems check out, then I would advocate at least and see if you can move forward.
I like that. I think a lot of people buy technology just because they think they almost want to absolve themselves of responsibility, and they're just like, oh yeah, like I bought a thing, I did the thing. It's kind of like massive companies or CEOs which need to do riffs or layoffs or make hard decisions. They hire McKinsey to blame, like push the blame and say like, oh yeah, we fired 30% of the company because McKinsey told us so. And I see a lot of people who do use technology that way. They're like, oh yeah, like we spent 250 grand on 6 cents and nothing happened. I'm like, yeah, no shit, nothing happened. Did you think about the strategy behind this? Did you know if you actually needed this tool?
Yeah.
How did that fit in? So I like actually sitting down and figuring out where are the gaps in our current process and where do we think the lowest hanging fruit is? Where do we think we're going to see the highest efficiency gains by fixing those? So like you mentioned, like verifiable numbers. We use Titanx as well. We actually like I think our stack is actually like fairly identical to yours across all
Yeah.
channels. So that's pretty funny. Okay, tell me. Speaking of data, I mean, like you guys are selling into sales, RevOps, similar to us, marketing, and I think you know, like I do, that people can buy data or tools, but there's this question of how to efficiently use it. So, and just like Rocket Reach's own capabilities, where do you see like your best customers winning, where they really can use Rocket Reach really well, and where do you see people maybe misusing or not really leveraging things as much as they can? And what's the difference between those types of teams you're seeing? And I'm using Rocket Reach because I imagine you're most familiar with that, but really this applies to any sort of technology purchase for a team.
Yeah. I think at Rocket Reach, we make it really tangible for customers to engage with the prospects that they want to do business with, right? We have really strong signals. Teams are setting up automated flows where, that's running in perpetuity, kind of in the background, pushing to their CRM weekly, contacts at companies that are searching for relevant topics that they're interested in that apply to what they, sell or solve for. And those reps are able to reach out, you know, and those reps are able to reach out consistently to prospects each week and push to generate pipeline, right? And we make that really easy and tangible for customers. UI is very straightforward. I would say that the biggest gap um, for other teams is probably just strategy, right? There's also some data decay, right? Some teams are targeting the wrong people. They're mixing functional users with economic buyers, and they're using like generic messaging. And a lot of reps that are in these types of roles, they lack business acumen, right? They can't connect a product to a tangible business outcome, and many hide behind email, right? Which I'm vehemently against. I think it's important to call and engage with people on social and other channels where you'll see a higher conversion rate. So consistently hitting the phone, also identifying companies that you should be selling to, and then at the end, it's just like having the most up-to-date verified data for those individuals is really important.
One thing I like that you said was you mentioned business acumen. And I think this is especially relevant for new sellers who
Yeah.
haven't necessarily been in the industry or in the seat for a while, maybe don't even understand their industry, the one they're operating in. And especially if you're talking to C-suite executives, it's very hard to have a good conversation that way, whether that be on the phone or something else. I'm curious from your perspective, how have you been coaching your reps, and also like what is your methodology to getting people to want to talk to you and getting them to want to open up? I know you've been putting out a lot of great thoughts on LinkedIn recently about objection handling, openers, regardless of channel. But I'm curious as to like what is your just philosophy around tying problems to your own product?
Yeah, I think, well, there's like two things there, right? Like what's, our outreach across the board, it feels like very casual, it gets replies and we're able to thread to a meeting in a natural way. And I think the goal is to remove friction. This is what I coach my reps on: removing friction, eliminating resistance as close to zero as possible, and making it very easy for your prospect to say yes. So you're starting off as a peer. It's a lot of short, open-ended questions, sometimes a little reverse psych mixed in, or this or that prompts that invite like a very quick answer. You don't want your prospects to think too much on the front end when you're engaging for the first time. And then if you do get a response, I always coach the reps to call right away, go into Rocket Reach, get their mobile phone, give them a call, right? If you don't get them on the phone, you can continue in the thread, 2 to 3 additional messages unrelated to what you sell or what your product does before you pivot. So that's worked out really well for us. And we get a lot of traction on LinkedIn, more than we ever have in any of my other roles, but also talking about things that are relevant to what we sell makes it easier to go in with like, an open-ended, unrelated kind of talking point. Cause I know in the back of my head that like, hey, like they're already thinking about what I want to talk about, but like, let me get there in a natural way. So that's been huge for us.
Do you feel like when one of your reps calls somebody or reaches out to somebody versus when you do it, I imagine they're same talk track, same everything. I imagine there's a little bit of a difference in terms of success rates. And that's just like kind of hard to overcome. Like maybe like you're like a fairly junior BDR or something along those lines. How do you think about getting people to sort of like level up their conversations or their presentation when they don't necessarily have the credibility to have that kind of conversation with somebody, an executive or a decision maker? Yeah, I'm just curious how you coach your reps to think about that kind of thing.
Well, it's tone over script every day of the week. So tone is huge and it's underrated. It's really hard to teach. It takes a meaningful investment from the sales coach to tweak and teach tone. So that's where I start with my reps. And the outbound reps that I have now do a really good job, even in even a better job than I do with getting into calls. Like the theme of sounding like genuinely curious. One of my reps, her name is Michaela. Like she does such a good job at sounding like lost, you know, and and almost confused when she calls prospects. Like she has no idea. Like she's lost in the middle of New York City. She's looking for help. Like everyone wants to help her, and she gets in, and before you know it, she's talking about what tools they're using and how they're going about, sourcing, leads and doing all the stuff, lead gen, and next thing you know, she's booking a demo. So I coach tone, right? And then it's important once you get into the conversation, right? Tone is a way for you to get in, right? And then once you get into the conversation, asking the right questions, peeling the onion back, shifting, right? Like we drill hard on like the outcomes, like tangible outcomes that our product, delivers for customers, so that if you do need to bring that up and share, a story and how we're doing, how we're helping others in their space, understanding like who the aspirational companies that are customers of ours that we're doing business with already, and being able to like spit those out, at a moment's notice is also important. But I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. We do, we go block by block and we build on the things that are most important, and that varies from rep to rep.
I love I mean, I hear this on my team as well. Like tonality is everything when it comes to cold calls. People often decide whether or not they want to talk to you just based on
Yeah.
how you sound. And I know there are different approaches. It sounds like for Michaela, it's sounding lost and they want to help her. For others, it's just being like very casual, cool, confident, as though it's like the most everyday thing to be cold calling somebody and for them to be answering and helping them out. So I love that. So there's a lot of stuff changing right now in terms of how people buy and sell. Outbound seems to be getting harder. I mean, everyone loves saying this, like cold outbound's dead, all that stuff, right? And there's some truth to it. I don't think there's a lot of truth to it, but yes, it is objectively a little bit harder than it was before. You'd already mentioned that with email, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you could load up a sequencer with a bunch of emails and you'd actually get a fairly high reply rate. Now, that doesn't really work anymore. High first name was cool at some point, doesn't work anymore. And so that's going to continue changing. How have you been sort of like staying ahead of the curve on that? And how are you thinking about like marrying outbound with other sort of like go to market functions at Rocket Reach?
It's about investing in the channels that are most effective, and phone phone and LinkedIn will always win. So you stay on top of those channels and you invest in tools that are going to get you, more effective within those channels, and you double down and you coach your reps on how to engage with prospects on those channels so that they can continue to get better and improve. I think that's the biggest thing. Try to pay attention to a lot of tools that people are using, and I talk to a lot of founders and I ask questions and I get demos. I just want to be up to speed on what's out there in case we need to act on something. But you don't have to go crazy with the tech stack to make this work. Just need to invest in your people and have some good tools to help you get there.
Yeah. I wonder what's going to happen in the same way that like Titan X is a great example, right? Everyone's buying a very similar list from them of P1 numbers. Do these P1 numbers eventually catch on and they're like, hey, people just keep calling me like crazy right now? And do they turn into P2, P3 numbers eventually because they're getting too many cold calls? I don't think we're at that point yet, but as with every channel, I wonder what happens there.